Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and as always, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. Welcome. I know the Seahawks are playing, but it's the half. They're playing the Giants. I expect a victory. Could be an upset. You never know. But the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest are going to get it done. I want to thank you for joining me here for Robservations, the show about something, episode number 570. You know, I get so stressed when I'm within 30 episodes of like the next big milestone number because, well, what am I going to do for the 600th show? I don't know. The 400 show was 5 different guests. The 500 show was all about you, the Post-Geek Singularity. I have no idea what I'm going to do for the 600th show, but I've got time. If you have suggestions, I'm all ears. I want to thank everybody that has been sending in their films. We premiered 4 today, 4 films from the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. A lot of interesting entries. Everything from a love story to a thriller to a time-traveling film. I mean, I am very impressed for just making up the idea, just pulling it out of my ass, really, that, hey, let's have a film festival. And obviously entries are closed, but in a little over 2 months, I received over 70 submissions, both films in and out of competition, and I can't thank you all enough. The next week, we'll see all the rest of them debut. I'm still waiting, of course, for films to come in. As long as you had your entry form in by the 1st of December, you have until December 15th at 11:59 Pacific time, which means, you know, if you're in a different time zone, you either have that much more time or perhaps not. But it's pretty great, and I can't thank all of you filmmakers out there enough. By the way, I'd like to say that I don't know who's doing it, but it's the height of disrespect to downvote something that you haven't seen yet. I mean, if you want to hate something, you can hate it. You know me. I hate things, but I at least watch them first. And I think our filmmakers, our fellow imagination connoisseurs, the people that went out of their way to make films, some people are making films for the very first time. If you hate their films, that's okay, but just hate on them after you've seen them. It's embarrassing, and I think it's very disrespectful to dislike something you haven't seen, especially when we're all part of the same community. And if you hate me, if you think I'm a douchebag, that's fine, but don't take it out on other people that are trying to do good work, some people that are doing work for the first time. You don't want to dissuade them of their creative energies. After all, this channel is here to celebrate all of the effort, to celebrate every imagination connoisseur. You don't necessarily have to like me. I don't even have to like you. But I'll tell you something. I do certainly admire anybody who's going to indulge their desire or their dream of doing something creative, going out and making something that didn't exist before. And I would only ask that we respect everyone whose films or the effort they've put in. Something else. Scotty R37 just became an imagination connoisseur. Thanks for joining the channel. Those members are going to get a little treat today. You know what's coming. I don't know what you're all going to think about it. But as you know, yes, you'll finally get my drunk Moonraker commentary. 2 years. I've been sitting on it for 2 years, so hope you like it. That's just a gift for you members. Now, a number of you might remember that, I don't know which show it was, but one of the things that I have talked about on the show is movie making and different things you can learn or things that are important to know when you're going to embark on any kind of a career making films. And as I've said before, as a film producer, there are 2 things that you should organize up front and make sure that you do not skimp on, no matter what your budget level is. Those 2 things are, first and foremost, and don't laugh, food. You must make sure that your crew is well fed. Do not skimp on the catering and do not skimp on crafty. That means at your craft service table, you have fruit, you have nutritious food items rather than just junk food. You got to make sure that both Crafty and your caterers are up to snuff. Trust me. And you have to win the crew, just like Maximus had to win the crowd. Any filmmakers worth their salt, you know how long you have to win the crew? About half a day. You have until lunch on the first day of shooting. Because, one, the crew will know if the director knows what they're doing or not, and two, they'll know if the producer knows what they're doing or not, because the food will either be respectable or not. That means you need vegetable options, meat and fish options, different things. I leave that up to you, but it's important. The second thing that all of you budding producers must know is your actors must feel good about themselves when they step out onto your set, which means your hair and makeup people are of vital importance. You might laugh, but it is true. Food and hair and makeup people are two of the most key hires you can make when you're putting together your team to realize whatever motion picture or whatever television show you've set out to make. And one of the things that I talked about, I don't know, about 100 episodes ago, maybe, was I talked about the fact that there was a story, I shared a story with you, how there are not enough makeup artists in Hollywood that know how to work with black actors or other people of color. Hair and makeup is different for people that have darker skin. And there isn't enough people that know how to do that. And frequently, people of color did not or do not have the hair and makeup people they need in order to facilitate them looking their best. And that is a problem. Now, I would like to point something out that I thought was really interesting. Since I'm going to get into Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek in general in this episode, go figure. But as much as I might despise Star Trek Discovery, let me be clear. I don't despise the show because of the makeup of the actors, the makeup, the number of cast members that are people of color or LGBTQ. I have no problem with that at all. My problems with Star Trek Discovery really are in universe. From the storytelling standpoint, or from a lore standpoint, a canonical standpoint, I certainly don't have a problem with the actors on the show. And I also recognize that one of the important things, perhaps the most important thing about Star Trek Discovery, that it is following in the great tradition of Star Trek, is the representation that it has for all kinds of people on the show. Whether there are people, I bummed out Josh Rosowskis because I made a joke about we saw somebody in a wheelchair on the Discovery, and I wasn't clear. The reason that I was bringing that up is because I felt if somebody actually is in a wheelchair in the 23rd century, they would be in an anti-gravity wheelchair. They wouldn't be in a wheelchair that's on wheels. That would not exactly be the most convenient thing in, say, a firefight or going through an ion storm or something. And I would have thought that, especially with our drone technology of today, if there is going to be someone who is in a wheelchair that is a member of the crew, they would probably have an anti-gravity wheelchair that is gyroscopically balanced. So even in the worst shaking, that wheelchair would be stable. And I explained that to Josh, and because he said he always dreamt of perhaps being in Starfleet, and we know that Josh is disabled and he is in a chair. And I wanted to make sure that he understood, no, I didn't mean that there was not going to be necessarily anybody who's disabled in the future on a starship, but if they were, you would have not a wheelchair. I thought that was a little... We've seen that. We've seen in episodes like DS9's Melora, where people had exoskeletons depending on gravity. There would be devices that would allow people to function in the 23rd century or the 32nd. But anyway, one of the things that is important about Star Trek and always has been is representation. And one of the things that I've thought about the third season, is I think Sonequa Martin Green is a fantastically beautiful woman. And one of the great things about her this season is her hair. And since I had talked about, they haven't really made a big deal of it, but the fact that the year that she was able to spend with Book, she sort of came into her own. and I was very curious about her hair. And there was an article in the UK's Metro about this very thing. And it was written back on October 26th. So back in October. And I thought I would share it with you, which is something I never considered. And as much as I hate on Discovery, there are still elements of the show that are to be lauded and celebrated. And this was one of them. Star Trek Discovery, the cultural importance of Michael Burnham's braids for black viewers. Star Trek Discovery Season 3's latest episode, Far From Home, reunited the fleet with their leader, Michael Burnham. That in itself is a problem. Sonequa Martin Green, only to discover that she'd been stranded without them for more than a year. The most notable change in her quick appearance on screen was her hairstyle, with Burnham's cropped cut changed into long and intricately styled braids. While it might not mean much to some, David Ajala, who plays Burnham's new right-hand man Booker, it held a particular cultural importance, which he hopes translates to black viewers. Speaking to metrocode.uk, he explained, "I have to say I just love how Michael Burnham has got her beautiful braids. It was one of the best looks, and I wasn't expecting it. I love it. It suits her so well, it really does, and there's something culturally very powerful about seeing a black woman like that being able to have her braids, being at peace, and being given the room to stretch and be herself without having to explain herself. I think that's very important, not just for black women, but for people in general, period." And as I talked about in that article, typically black women are seen wearing wigs and weaves on screen, with many actresses admitting they were encouraged to look more Eurocentric. Others have stated that they've run into trouble on set, as hairstylists aren't used to dealing with Afro hair. Among those who have spoken out are Lupita Nyong'o, who called out a magazine in 2017 for editing out her afro in Photoshop to appear more Eurocentric, and Community's Yvette Nicole Brown, who revealed she often had to do her own hair before arriving before filming. Gabrielle Union also claimed that she was told her hairstyles were too black while working on America's Got Talent. It's not just actresses. Watchmen star Yahya Abdul-Mateen II saying he's seen stylists just figuring it out without asking as he sat down in the chair. This happens away from the public eye, too, with research from beauty brand Dove in December 2019 revealing black women are a staggering 80% more likely to change their natural hair in order to be deemed more socially acceptable in a workplace environment. As a result, wearing braids, a style that dates back thousands of years, can be seen as empowering for people of color as it allows themselves to embrace their heritage more freely. It's something that David didn't quite appreciate himself until he saw co-star Sonequa taking on the look. The thing is, me looking from the outside in, I think I kind of underestimated or overlooked the importance and significance of what that means, especially for black women, he told us. To be able to have their hair freely and not be policed by people's insecurities or prejudice, I think that is such a powerful, powerful thing. This is one of the reasons why Star Trek is so special, because it's always been at the forefront of normalizing diversity. It's needed, and especially in a time like this, where we have so many things happening around the world. Star Trek for me just represents the light, not just the light at the end of the tunnel, but the light in all of us together, individually and collectively. So that was from Booker himself. And I got to say, absolutely. And that's something that I think we have to remember, that we might not like certain things, and that is okay. But there's always different sides to things that we might not consider. And that was something that I really, in all of I registered that, yes, I think Sonequa Martin Green is hot, and she looks great with that hairstyle, but it never occurred to me that it had meaning beyond making her look different for the third season to account for the year she spent away from Discovery. But hearing her fellow actors say something like this, also a man of color, I thought that was important. And it always makes me reconsider sometimes, well, maybe I shouldn't be so hard on Star Trek Discovery. Only for a few moments, though. But that's a whole different thing. Representation and people being able to see certain things on television is important, but that doesn't necessarily, to me, make what is being told to us, or the story being told, doesn't make the stories better. But anyway, So what I wanted to jump into today was over on a Facebook page called Axamonitor, which was a Facebook page that was created in the wake of the CBS lawsuit of the Axanar Star Trek fan film project that I was involved with. I had a very cantankerous relationship with them at first. They were adversarial to us, and as people know, and I've had to explain over the past couple of years, my interest in working on Axanar began because I was asked by a friend to come on and work, and when we did the first part of Axanar, Prelude to Axanar, it went off great. Went off without a hitch. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Very proud of that work that I did. And then eventually I replaced the director of that project, and it was my desire to recreate that same success but on a feature film level. And I was working toward that goal. But anyway, obviously the impresario of that project and I found ourselves at odds, and hasn't gone well since then. But the Axamonitor people have gone on and they've been charting the ups and downs, let's say, of the project. But also, I've found myself frequently on the receiving end of ire from certain people, either on Twitter. Actually, it's the same people that are on Twitter that go over on the board. But they were interested in some of the things I had to say, and watched an episode where I was discussing how I couldn't stand the episode of Discovery Unification 3 and a lot of things I felt that what it meant to me. But one of the people on the Axamonitor site that I really didn't know wrote a blog, and it's an open letter to me. And let's call it DJ Meta, Metta, wrote an open letter to me. So I figured I would share this open letter with all of you and respond to the letter. And here it is, which I thought was pretty interesting. Star Trek's essence is kind world syndrome. Michael Burnham with an endearing messianic complex. Should we call her a Wesley crusher? Dear Rob, Robservations, the Burnettwork. I had my first encounter with your vlog this week, Robservations 565, in which you bitterly complained about what you perceived as the shortcomings of Star Trek Discovery. While I've not watched the whole episode you were upset about, I would like to respond to some of your overall critiques of the show and of contemporary pop culture. I'll say right off the bat, I'm probably close to the way of thinking of Kate Stark. I read some of her words. She's somebody who's over on that Axamonitor board who's analyzed our script. She's a very intelligent human being, and I quite enjoy reading what she has to write and say, even though I don't always agree with her. But anything she writes is worth reading. While I'm old enough to proudly state I was present on planet Earth for TOS when it was first released, I have spent quite a bit of time with Gen Xers, of which I am, and millennials, and tend to think more like them than the boomers, despite my chronological age. I've recently been introducing my partner to the world of Trek, and so it prompted me to go back to the beginning and start to work my way through the whole body of Star Trek work, going back to 1966. So with this renewed perspective, I return to thoughts on Discovery. I do not hate Discovery as you seem to. I do not agree that it is a repudiation of classic Trek, although I would agree that there are times I feel uncomfortable with some of the places the show seems to be going. But especially in Season 3, it seems to me that in many ways the show is bending over backwards to return to a more classic Trek approach, and I've enjoyed several of these episodes way more than anything that has come before. I disagree with the idea that it's going back to a classic Star Trek approach, and I have the third season has not changed my opinion. I think all of the problems that Star Trek Discovery has as a show, as a Star Trek show, and as science fiction have just every season have just changed, but the same problems remain. I have to say I'm not convinced by your connecting the Vulcans with Israelis and Romulans with Palestinians and charging Discovery with being anti-Jewish. I think that analysis stems simply from your thought process out of your historical, cultural location as a Jewish person. I myself am Irish, so I think I could just easily make some kind of stretch analogy between the Vulcans and the Irish and the Northern Irish as Romulans, and their issues are like the trouble in Ulster. Here's an excerpt from an Irish Times article alleging that there were rumors at the time that the Spock character was inspired by a painting that hung in an Irish pub in Dublin for many years. A story doing the backlots of the studios in Culver City outside LA in the 1960s was that Leonard Nimoy's character, Mr. Spock, was inspired by a painting which hung in a Dublin bar. It's a great story, and having seen the painting myself, the resemblance is astonishing. I think this would be at least as much of a long reach as your Israeli-Palestine analogy, so maybe I should charge Discovery with being anti-Irish? Nah, I think both analogies are flimsy, so I won't insist on the other one, although they both make interesting thought experiments. Listen, when I was growing up, Star Trek the original series definitely cast in its two prominent Vulcan roles two men that were Jewish. Mark Leonard, who is Spock's father, and of course Leonard Nimoy himself, was an Orthodox Jew. Then there was Celia Lofsky, who ran, she was certainly a matriarch in Vulcan society that we met at in the episode of Muck Time. I also believe that Arlene Martell was Jewish as well. Now, there was a certain look that they were all obviously casting for, and as somebody who's Jewish myself and being brought up, as I explained, my grandfather looks similar to Leonard Nimoy. There was definitely, I think, a conscious attempt to at least, I would say that a lot of the Vulcan way of life as depicted in the original series had a little bit, it was definitely informed by Judaism. Now that changed as Star Trek grew and we moved beyond the original series into, say, the Next Generation. But I do think that the soul of the Vulcans were, at least in my mind, always were sort of Jewish. And I think the way the Vulcans are being written, as a matter of fact, it's not just the Vulcans either, but there is, in some circles, you could say that there is definitely an anti-Israeli bias that extends to anti-Jewish bias. Certainly, I've experienced myself on college campuses, and but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I do think that I have more of. I could get into it more and give you specific details, but because that's not the gist of your letter, I'll stay away from that. One point where I want to heartily agree with you is that I seriously dislike the violence and body count that Discovery's approach that incorporates and seems to be in common with all of New Trek, starting with J.J. Abrams' Kelvin timeline stuff. The body count BS is something I don't want to watch or include in my life. In the 1970s, communications professor George Gerber came up with the term mean world syndrome. I love this, by the way. This mindset basically says, life is mean, so we just have to be mean to make it through. This body count mentality seems to me to be just a part of mean world syndrome, to my way of thinking that violates a precept of the Federation and Gene Roddenberry, hereafter GR, and the whole team of the originator's vision for Star Trek. I think Star Trek, at least classic Trek, is instead advocating for a kind world syndrome. Maybe that's why some people get all hung up on Mary Sue's and such. They're tripping over kind world syndrome nature of Star Trek itself. The kind world nature syndrome of Star Trek itself. And speaking of mean world syndrome, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that the snide overuse of the very phrase Mary Sue has a strong misogynistic tilt to it. Perhaps instead, to avoid the legitimate charge of misogyny, we should call them Wesley Crushers, since that was a wish fulfillment character for Gene Roddenberry. Note that Gene Roddenberry's middle name was Wesley, or even James T. Kirk. This is where you and I part ways. The idea of the Mary Sue character, the Mary Sue trope, as I explained a couple days ago on the show, was really something that was pioneered by women. And it was pioneered by women in fan fiction. Obviously, I covered the story, Diane Carey's books, Dreadnought and Battle Stations. And the idea of the Mary Sue, I think, has been sort of misunderstood, because the Mary Sue trope came about when authors were inserting proxy characters of basically themselves into stories where they it was, like you said, it was wish fulfillment. But now I think the term is being bandied about all over the place, and all kinds of characters are being called Mary Sues or Gary Stews. But I think, obviously, I think it has a long tradition with female writers and female fanfic. If you want to go back into fan circles, fanzines, all of that, and I think that it's definitely problematic. But it was more like a true Mary Sue story to me. It really is. It's a proxy. It's an author proxy character, and I understand that. The ultimate wish fulfillment. We all want to dream. I used to play on the playground when I was in elementary school, pretending I was playing Star Trek, and I always cast myself as Captain Kirk, and I would tell people if they weren't playing the parts right, how to do it. And somehow they would listen to me. But I think that I don't think calling characters Mary Sue characters is necessarily misogynistic. In my mind, my first encounter with Mary Sue, the Mary Sue tropes, came from female writers. So I most associate Mary Sue stories with female writers. That's not to say that men can't write Gary Sue stories either. But I mean, those Diane Carey Star Trek novels were actually published. I owned them. And even when I was reading them, I was like, wait a minute. I mean, come on. It was hard to believe that she was able to get those books officially published, but she was, so more power to her. But so the term Mary Sue, and it was coined before that, it was because it was females that were in that role most at first, at least the way I came to understand the Mary Sue trope. So I don't necessarily think that it's misogynistic as much as it is. That's just from me when I first came across what a Mary Sue story was. They were female characters that were created by female writers. So to call it misogynistic, I mean, I think it's probably definitely become a misogynistic term now because of the way fandom is. But when it first happened, I wasn't thinking about it being misogynistic. I was just going with it thinking, why am I reading a story about a main character I've never met before, who's as good, if not better, than the main characters? I mean, that's all I thought. I feel ambivalent about whether I think it's such a bad thing that James T. Kirk, Wesley Crusher, Mary Sue, and Michael Burnham have a strong element of wish fulfillment, superheroism, heroism, avatarism, or as Book called it in this episode, Burnham's endearing messianic complex in their story arcs. Since Gene Roddenberry directly injected Wesley into the canon, I think we could make a reasonable argument that Wesley Crushers have a place in the world of Star Trek, and that just because they bring the quality of wish fulfillment with them doesn't automatically mean that they are just bad stories, as you put it. I acknowledge that when Wesley Crusher was unveiled, many fans had a similar reaction about his wish fulfillment messianic aspect. But at least after Gene Roddenberry's lowered involvement and then passing, those aspects were toned down a bit with Wesley, and I think many of those same fans came to enjoy Wesley's superheroism qualities. I mean, think about the character of the Traveler in the episode Journey's End. Wesley Crusher basically became a Q-type or Organian type, or perhaps even more powerful than that, non-corporeal super being. And even prior to that, he is portrayed as being at the right place and the right time with the right idea, way more than a real person might have a right to expect. So for me, avatarism and Wesley Crusherism does not automatically disqualify the story's value. I might not want an exclusive diet of Wesley Crusherism, but I'm okay to have some elements of it and still call it Trek. How could we do otherwise? Is Next Generation somehow not Trek? Now here's where you totally lose me. I don't see Wesley Crusher as being a Mary Sue character. In The Next Generation, the original conception was that on these long voyages, people were going to bring their children with them. And I think the Wesley Crusher character was originally conceived as being absolutely a precocious character. But it was also going to be the time where you could see a Starfleet officer in the form of Beverly Crusher relate to her son, which was something we'd never seen before. Other than Sarek and Spock, Amanda and Spock, we'd never really seen. Sure, there were episodes that dealt with parental relationships, but not an ongoing parent and child relationship as part of the principal cast of a Star Trek show. So I don't think that in conception, Wesley Crusher was supposed to be this precocious super genius saving the ship at every turn that he turned out to be in many of the episodes. But I have to say that the way that character developed, the way all characters developed, when you add episodes like The First Duty, that was one of the finest episodes of Star Trek, and the relationship that Picard had with Wesley was terrific. And there was a lot of character interplay once they got past the fact that Wesley Crusher, obviously, he was a scientific genius because he loved science. He studied science. He was always shown learning about science in his, whether it was in his extracurricular studies or whether an episode like The Game, these kinds of things. He was not shown as being an expert at everything. You know, you didn't really, in Final Mission, he's out of his depth. And the fact that he has to step up and help a wounded Picard, it was a tough thing. He didn't know if he could do it. So I don't think that Wesley Crusher was a Mary Sue. I think the reason people disliked Wesley Crusher was, one, there hadn't been a child as part of the cast of a Star Trek show. And when children were on the original Star Trek and TOS, it usually didn't go very well. Then you ended up with episodes like Miri, which was pretty good, or episodes like And the Children Shall Lead, which is, in my mind, one of the most abysmal hours of science fiction television ever made, Star Trek or not. So I think it's, I don't understand the comparison of Wesley Crusher to a Mary Sue or to Michael Burnham, because Wesley Crusher's level of interest in things, I mean, there are episodes, I think, The Dolphin being one of them. Maybe not a great episode of Star Trek, but the relationship that Wesley Crusher had with our titular character was a poignant, interesting, pretty great relationship that you could see a teenage boy having. The problem with Wesley Crusher, as the problem is with most bad Star Trek, is in the writing. And sure, yes, was young Wesley a proxy for Gene Roddenberry? Most certainly. But I don't think if you go and you look, it's the same thing. Like, we have come to believe through our popular culture that Kirk is this philandering, maybe not philandering, but a total womanizer. We believe that in every episode of Star Trek, red shirts die, even though Scotty is, of course, the support staff, engineering, all those, they're all red shirts. And yes, security people, especially in an episode like The Apple, we lose a lot of them. But if you really go back and you look and see who passes away, it's not as bad as pop culture would have you believe. And now our pop culture with the "Shut Up Wesley" meme has made more of the hatred of the Wesley Crusher character than he really deserves. And there are some fine episodes with Wesley, and he is not a character that can do everything. Sure, when the ship, obviously it's Star Trek, so a lot of the solutions to problems on the Enterprise were science-based, and Wesley could go in and help out because he's precocious and he's interested in those things. Now, yes, as you pointed out, in Journey's End, when the Traveler comes and gets him, whether he's a super being or not, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's being facilitated partly by the Traveler, or who and what he is. So, I understand where you're going with that, but we don't really see much where that goes and where that leads him, which I think is unfortunate. I think Wesley Crusher was a character that was just not well written. But Wesley Crusher was never a character, even in not Code of Honor, Coming of Age, another pretty decent episode in the first season of Next Generation, where he takes his first test for the Academy and he fails, or he passes a test but he doesn't get into the Academy. That's not a Mary Sue character, and I just wanted to point that out. I don't think that it's fair to call Wesley Crusher that kind of a character. You go on to say, also, we have to acknowledge Kirk's similar, nearly superheroic knack for always being in the right place at the right time with the right solution, which break or alter the rules a la the Kobayashi Maru simulation. So maybe instead of Mary Sue or Wesley Crusher, we should call them James T. Kirk type characters. We could not possibly make a serious argument that this James T. Kirk-ism superheroism has no place in real Star Trek. I don't understand that either, because James Kirk never accomplished anything without his crew. First and foremost being Spock and Dr. McCoy. James Kirk was never shown as being a superhero, but because a TV show is a TV show, he certainly was front and center, the hero of the show. But the whole point of Star Trek is he was incomplete without his ship and his crew. He couldn't go off on his own and solve a problem. You know, he certainly was inspiring to those around him, but he's certainly not a Gary Stu character or some character that is infallible. And we saw that throughout the original series. Whenever he lost crewmen, he didn't protect everybody on his ship. In episodes like Balance of Terror, why me? You know, and McCoy has to remind him of his duty and remind him of, yeah, the pressure's going to get to you, but you need to step up and don't let the one named Kirk be destroyed. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, Kirk is obsessed. He's out of his depth. He is wrong in his behavior. And it is McCoy who has to step in and tell him. Even in a funny episode, like A Piece of the Action, Spock would say, "You are an excellent starship commander, but as a taxi driver, you leave much to be desired." The whole point of Star Trek is that you had, yes, amazingly competent people that were on the Enterprise. That's why I loved Star Trek. It was a meritocracy, and it was elite. These were the best of the best. These were people that you could aspire to be. Whether you were, anyone on the bridge of the Enterprise, that was the place in the universe to be. If you were a human being, you wanted to be on the bridge of the Enterprise because that meant you were the best of the best to get there. And I don't think that's the same as being a Mary Sue or a Wesley Crusher as you describe that person. Then you go on to say, so I completely reject your James T. Kirk-ism superheroism. I don't see that as being a part of Star Trek at all. And then you go on to say, so then maybe what people are actually uncomfortable with is that Michael Burnham is an ostensibly female character, not to mention played by a person of African descent. Maybe what people are really saying is that males can be superheroic, avataristic, but females cannot. No, the point of view looks to me to be purely and simply misogynistic. I just learned the term misogynoir. See Forbes' article, Misogynoir, the unique discrimination that black women face, for more on this phenomenon. I'm going to go, there we go. Well, I'll put this in the live chat so anybody can read it. So here you go. That sounds interesting. I did not read this article, but I definitely think that probably just knowing how you describe it obviously has some merit. I don't think anybody dislikes Michael Burnham because she's black or a woman. I like Michael Burnham. I think she's a horribly written character where she is able to fix anything. Now, people have said to me, well, Discovery is really about Michael Burnham. Well, okay, but the problem is Star Trek is a genre unto itself. And we have come to understand that Star Trek is an ensemble show that at its very core is about the need for a crew, not just one person. And the way Michael Burnham has been written, especially this season, Michael Burnham really is. I wish Freddie Mercury was still with us so he could sing a song, Michael, savior of the universe, she'll save every one of us, because she does in every episode. And this season, how many episodes have we seen where she's front and center? Literally the center of the universe, traveling through time. I'm sure whether did she cause the burn, and is she going to fix it? I don't know. I think Michael Burnham is a character that's written where even when she runs off with Mira Georgiou. It's really Michael Burnham that's there to save the day. I think it's bad writing, and it's bad Star Trek, because every other character is sidelined and marginalized behind her. And that's not what Star Trek is. And look, I don't think you can say to anybody that, it's too easy to label somebody a misogynist because I've listened to this my whole life. You comic book fans, you don't like female characters, or, you don't like a strong black woman character. Well, I know in my mind, I've never cared about whether a character was of a certain color or whether they were a male or a female character. What I've always cared about is good characters. One of my favorite characters in the new Teen Titans was Donna Troy, was Wonder Girl, because I liked the fact that I was reading a comic book where one of the main team members was not just an Amazonian, but also was married, and had a domestic life. I love that character. I love Coriander too, but I think anybody can embrace, and I think fans can embrace female characters when they're well written. And I think Star Trek has proven that we had Catherine Janeway, female captain, Ben Sisko, male black captain. And the thing about Deep Space Nine is race was never really an issue in that show. The only thing that I think I remember when we finally got to the fourth season, when Sisko shaved and grew the goatee and he looked more like Hawk, people didn't talk about, he looks like a badass black dude. They were saying he looked more like a previous character where he was a badass, and people wanted to see more of that of him. And I think that, Deep Space Nine, I've often said, it has one of the most important portrayals of black characters in television history, specifically Sisko's relationship he has with his son, Jake. The fact that you have a single black father, a widowed black father, who has a loving, caring, very functional, respectful relationship with his son, was something that you didn't see a lot on television outside of, say, The Cosby Show. This was really important, groundbreaking stuff. But nobody, certainly not the show creators, were banging on about how look at our representation we're bringing to this show. No, they just did it because in the 24th century, nobody would care anymore. And that's something that every day on Star Trek now, every new episode of Discovery, they're going to give us representation the way we feel it should be now in the 21st century, with catchphrases or whether people are going to describe themselves in a certain way. It doesn't allow for the fact that, especially in the 32nd century, don't you think humanity would have evolved beyond these petty petty differences? People are not going to care when you're now a galaxy-spanning race. Nobody's going to care who you're going to have sex with. Nobody's going to care what color people are, because you're now dealing with interspecies relationships. You're dealing with people who fall in love with non-human characters. So the idea that we have to have a scene where one character explains about her pronouns and being non-binary on Star Trek in the 32nd century, to me, is a huge failure of imagination. And so to say that we don't like the shows because Michael Burnham is a black woman, I think is really, it's belittling to the people that you're saying that to. When I think that really, look, I love Sonequa Martin Green. Clearly, on other shows, she's been a great actress. And I think she is a good actress, and I think she's an incredibly beautiful woman. But I think the writing that she's had to put up with, her line delivery, the fact that she cries every other episode. How are you supposed to believe the milieu that we're looking at when every other episode is there's a moment where people stop to have a hug? Let's hug it out. Let's talk about it. Is that what Star Trek is as a genre? And when you say, okay, well, I want to see Star Trek evolve. Well, I want to see Star Trek evolve. It's still Star Trek. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not watching This Is Us in space. I'm not. And that's not what Star Trek is. So the idea then that somebody starts saying that I'm misogynistic or other fans are misogynistic because they don't like Sonequa Martin Green's portrayal of Michael Burnham, I think is very unfair, especially to people who expect certain things, and they have expected certain things from a 54-year-old franchise that has delivered over a half century, and there are expectations to be met. Anyway, the one part of the argument you made that I found a bit more compelling, now I'm back to your letter, was when you quoted Spock's brother Sybok from a movie I enjoy, but which is regularly put down among the Star Trek fandom. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, that we need to face our pain. Sybok says, your pain runs deep. Let us explore it together. Each hides a secret pain. It must be exposed and reckoned with. It must be dragged from the darkness and forced into the light. Share your pain with me, and gain strength from the sharing. I agree with you that there's some profound insight there, but does that really mean people have to toughen up? Isn't that just another way of expressing mean world syndrome? I don't think so, because when you're on the edge of the final frontier, there's certain realities about what you're doing there. You have to toughen up. The universe is indifferent to your suffering. A black hole will not, it eats light. And when you're living or working or trying to explore that kind of an environment, I don't think anybody has time to be mean. What they have time to be is good at their jobs. And they have to be good and competent, which means they have to be. The people that are in Starfleet, that are on Starfleet ships, are the most fully aware, self-actualized, and understanding human beings that exist. They're the best of the best. And that was sort of something that, while Star Trek never stated it, by us as viewers watching, we knew those people were that way, which is part of the reason that Star Trek was so appealing in the first place. Because those people were that damn good. That's why we loved them. I mean, my problem with Star Trek Discovery is I think all of those people are idiots. I don't like any of them. There's nobody there that I would think that, you know what? Yep, let's follow them into battle. They would get... It's amazing that they've stumbled through this far and made it. And that's one of the things I don't believe about this show. I don't believe that the characters as they are depicted on this show would ever be where they are in a Federation starship. I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. Maybe Discovery is actually applying the process that Sybok was advocating. I think advances in trauma care have proven that just rub a little dirt in it and you'll be fine kind of mean world approach to working with trauma doesn't work. Maybe Discovery is actually reflecting this advance in humanics' understanding of trauma care. Rather than seeing therapy as somehow indicating a slide backward, I see it as a more advanced society. So when you equated it with weakness, you stopped making sense to me. Look, the reason they put a counselor on the bridge of the Enterprise is clearly mental health is a problem or is something that we all have to be mindful of. And the kind of stresses you would feel if you're one of those people out on the edge and you're in the final frontier coming up against things that you barely understand, much less can cope with. Of course you're going to need mental health. Of course you're going to need counselors. And that makes sense. But you're also going to be one tough bastard in order to have made it through Starfleet Academy and working your way up through the system and getting to a place of where you're going to want to be. I mean, too much emotion is not necessarily a good thing. You know, you have to be a person that understands. There has to be a little Vulcan in everybody in order to be on a starship. You have to be able to control your feelings. You know, you can't be fragile. And I think that that's another failure of imagination, that the people that are being depicted in Star Trek Discovery feel like people that I know. Okay, everyone's got a problem. Let's hug it out. Let's cry. Let's do this. Let's do that. They don't feel like the kind of people that belong on Federation starships. When I say they have to toughen up, I mean, you have to be a certain kind of person that can go, like the idea that the Discovery has gone 1,000 years in the future, they go back to Earth, and all of a sudden they talk about how everybody's depressed, and the whole ship's like, oh, we feel awful. No, going 1,000 years into the future would be like the ultimate adventure for a lot of these people. They're out, they take 5-year missions. They're used to being away from people for a long time. These are people that can cope. Look at our own astronaut program. Look at how hard it was to become one of the Mercury 7. And you think being on a starship, everybody's going to be like, oh, kumbaya, let's hug it out. Oh, it's so good to have you back. No, none of those people. This is part of the reason that I find Star Trek so unbelievable now. It's because the writers, unlike Mary Sue, where you're writing characters that are some heroic proxy of you, all of the writers are writing reflections of themselves into this show about what they feel about diversity or how they feel about their own therapy sessions or talking among. It's so of today, and it feels so. It is. These writers want to write their our mission is to use the Star Trek platform or the Star Trek genre, and we're going to tell you people, we're not going to tell you a story and let you glean from that story whatever you want. We're going to actually show you what our agenda is, how we think you should be. And I think that they're writing Michael Burnham that way. They're writing Michael Burnham as sort of the ultra fantasy character that call it the ultimate left-leaning postmodernist portrayal of a human being, that all of these things. I mean, human beings are complex people. We have the good and we have the bad. And I think that this idea of how people are being portrayed on Discovery betrays the very nature of what Star Trek as a show is. And they've tried to inject more self-actualization in there, forgetting that I would assume, and I think everybody assumes, that our crew are tougher than that. They look like a bunch of people that at any one time could buckle, whether it's from PTSD or emotional distress or whatever. They're going to freak out. They can't do their jobs in a clutch situation. And that's exactly the opposite of what Star Trek characters have always been. As a matter of fact, in the real world, nobody would put up with that. If you were in that situation on a starship, those people, if it's so easy to rattle you for whatever reason, you don't belong there. And that's part of my problem with the show. I can't buy into these characters. I hear you here. Back to the letter. I hear you say that it's somehow not okay for people to turn to their mothers for wisdom in their time of trial. No, I didn't say that. But in a Star Trek show where one of our main characters, remember, she called this old Vulcan right because she thought she was being clever. Her mother just happens to show up, the part of this Romulan order. First of all, that was, I think, a huge mistake because, once again, it's the Burnham family that changes the world. And why is it that Michael Burnham's mother has to show up on the show in her long, dark night of the soul and give her this advice, give her this motherly advice? Again, you're showing why, if Michael Burnham needs her mother to show up and tell her how to behave in front of Vulcans, she grew up, apparently, with Vulcans. And yet her mother has to show up, absolute candor now. Really? Really? That doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, there are times when I would love to have taken my mom into a meeting with me, a Hollywood meeting with, say, a famous producer, and had my mother give me the kind of advice so I would know what to say to that producer to get the money or to get the project greenlit. What does that say? I mean, nowadays, I guess, people we're so fragile that we need our parents. I don't think giving advice is ever problematic. When Kyle Riker finally made peace with his son, that was a nice scene in the second season of Next Generation. When the end of Star Trek IV, when Sarek and Spock tell her I feel fine, those are great scenes. But literally, you take your character that's front and center, who herself has called this ancient rite that we've never heard of, but it was kind of cool, the whole idea behind it, and then literally it's her mother that has to help her through it. How am I supposed to admire Michael Burnham if in the clutch moment she has to have her mother come and save her? Her mother has to be her own Romulan advocate. I mean, I'm watching this and I'm like, what is this really saying? It's saying that Michael Burnham is not qualified to do her fucking job. I mean, if she didn't have her mommy there, and she didn't know her mommy was there, but if she didn't, like everything else, start a war, run off and do this, get captured. I mean, I can't get behind a show that gives me characters that at any one moment need their mother to magically appear and save their ass. I can't go there. It doesn't say that. Of course you can go to your parents for advice. But you know what? I mean, it's just problematic for me. And I think it's bad storytelling. And what does that say? I mean, the universe, again, is indifferent to your suffering. And if you have decided to go on a course of action like Michael Burnham did with these Vulcans, that having your mom magically show up in your time of need, that is not what's going to be happening out in the far reaches of space. The last thing you need is you have to be able to rely on yourself and your crew. But the fact that, nope, Michael Burnham couldn't rely on her crew, she had to have her mother magically show up. I don't object to anybody getting help from their parents, but I do in the middle of a science fiction action adventure show, when you have a character like Michael Burnham who's already does whatever she wants, and then magically her mom shows up to help her through a situation. So she realizes it. That's what McCoy and Spock would do for Kirk. Or that's what Kirk would do for Spock. Or what Spock would do for McCoy or Kirk. The fact that you have to have another character show up and help our main character through a time of need, that doesn't track for me, you say. Why would our parents be out of bounds for our wisdom gathering? They're not. But in the context of what we're seeing on Star Trek, I think it's a crutch. I think it's bad writing. And worse than that, I think it sends a terrible message. It sends a terrible message that when you're in the middle of something, you're in a time of great need, you can't call home to mom. Your mom's not going to show up and help you. You're on a fucking Federation starship. You've got your crew. Your shipmates are the ones that are supposed to stand behind you, and they're the ones that are supposed to advise you. But no, they write all the rest of the characters on the show. They're so weak. Saru can't figure out a catchphrase. He can barely captain the ship. There's no other characters on that entire show that are worthy of even talking to in terms of getting advice. There's no relationships like we've come to know from our Star Trek shows of the past. That is another huge weakness on the part of this show. Anyway, then you say, why do you assert it has to be only from our colleagues? I guess then we'll have to write off the Beatles lyrics from Let It Be. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, whispering words of wisdom, let it be. Mother Mary? But anyway, it's different because when that song was being written and sung by the Beatles, they were not in the far-flung reaches of outer space dealing with, a civilization that was once a founding member of the Federation that isn't anymore. And when you've tweaked them and called upon something that you have really stepped in, that maybe you've gone over your bounds, there's nothing wrong with calling your parents. But at that particular moment, I mean, it was just blind luck that her mother just happened to be not just on Vulcan, but somehow became a Romulan practitioner of the Quat Milat and joined this order of, which is kind of weird in itself, but okay. Wasn't that convenient? Then you go on. Really, do you really think that all care and gentleness is just malarkey? No. And why you would think I would say that is silly. I bet in retrospect you have more compassionate takes on that and would reformulate whatever it was that you meant to say. List-wise to me, again, it just comes off that you have the view that there's something wrong with mothers. Maybe because they're females and too coddling and are inherently not tough enough. Though we know nurturance is hardly a universal female trait either, and that it is common in males as well. So then we would arrive back at misogyny and the mean world syndrome. So what you're now saying is that because I had a problem with Michael Burnham's mother showing up, you've now made this this opinion of me personally that I have a problem with mothers or strong female role models, and that leads you back to the fact that I have deep-seated misogyny. Let me tell you something about my mother. My mother is one of the strongest people I've ever met in my life. My mother's mother died of breast cancer, so my mom knew that she was probably going to get breast cancer. when she finally was diagnosed with breast cancer, you know what she did? Before we even knew, she made a decision and she booked an appointment to have a radical mastectomy, which means they take a breast and her lymph nodes. Now, her favorite thing to do in the world, her religion was golf. And she knew that she wasn't going to be able to golf, her favorite thing in the world, for at least a year. But there was no way she was going to sit around and let what happened to her mother happen, because her mother wouldn't deal with it. So before we even knew, before my dad, my sister, and I knew, my mom had booked the appointment and was going in, didn't think twice. 6 weeks after she was out of the hospital, she was golfing again, and she won the club championship that year at Glendale Country Club. Now, 3.5 years later, she was also diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had another radical mastectomy. This was in her 30s, late 30s. Now she's 81 and going strong. She's in great shape. So the women that I've had in my life, I've been lucky. I've had many strong women. I grew up loving women. But I'll tell you something. I don't think my mother, if I was in a situation where I needed to be somewhere, my mother would offer me encouragement. But you know what? She would say, you better face this shit down yourself, son. I'm here with you. I'll support you. But you've got to do it yourself. And it's just odd that we or that you or that anybody would assume, because I don't like a situation where a character that's traditionally in a show, a thing, a franchise that I've loved for over 50, well, I haven't loved it for over 50 years, but for almost 50 years, that I'm somehow, it comes back down to misogyny. So this is my problem. That my problem with a story and characters in a story and the way it's written somehow then reflects on me that I'm a misogynist is silly. It's ridiculous. I'm speaking specifically about this one storyline in this one episode of this Star Trek show. I don't think that my objection to Michael Burnham's mother showing up and saving her ass makes me a misogynist. What it makes me is somebody who hates fucking bad storytelling. That's what it makes me. And it doesn't make, so you go on to say, maybe because they're females too coddling and are inherently not tough enough. Listen, man, mothers bring us into the world. They take all of our problems onto their shoulders. The idea that I think mothers are too coddling and not tough enough, carrying life inside of you for 9 months and then making sure that life reaches fruition and then raising that life and hopefully giving it a nice, a good foundation with which you can exist for the rest of the time on this planet. I have no problem with strong mothers. As a matter of fact, I've been blessed in my life to know a lot of strong women. I love strong women. As a matter of fact, I just like strong people in general. I don't think it's too coddling, and I have no problem with nurturing or any of that. That's the power of the strength that the feminine. The feminine has a strength in it that the masculine could never have. Because that strength is derived from an emotional bond that is unbreakable, the emotional bond between a mother and a child. Men don't know what it's like to carry life inside them that gestates. We're woefully unable to quite grasp that bond. But to think that motherhood or that the feminine energy that a mother brings to both her male and female children is at all somehow not full of incredible strength is wrong. And the idea that somebody would think that I would think that, I don't buy that at all. And the idea that you write, though we know nurturance is hardly a universal female trait either, and that it is common in males as well. I didn't say it was not. There's a lot of nurturing in men too. And look, I'm one of the people that I think human beings are more successful in life when you have strong male and female role models, whether they're your mother and father or other people or mentors. I think having both male and female role models in your life that help guide you as a human being as you develop is always a good thing. It's always a good thing. You go on to say, Also, I have to say this says to me that your argument was insufficiently critical of the militaristic and toxic masculinity aspects of Star Trek. Isn't the character Spock himself a built-in critique of these attitudes? Rather, I would say the Star Trek attitude that it is only through the struggle that Spock goes through, both internally and socially, with his half-Vulcan and half-human beingness, and as Spock eventually integrates it all, that he becomes fully self-actualized. As Kirk eulogizes at Spock's funeral, of my friend I can only say this: of all the souls I've encountered in my travels, his was the most human. I don't see that you really made an argument that it was not okay for mothers or parents to be conveyors of wisdom, or for children to receive wisdom from their mothers and parents. You just asserted and ranted that it was so. I actually don't think you could really make a good logical argument for this point of view, and I think if you consider in detail, you very well may come away disagreeing with what you said in that moment. I don't think so. I think obviously the character of Spock, being that he's a man of two worlds, is the center of his character. The fact that he loves both his mother, yes, and Spock loves his mother and loves his father. Vulcans have emotions. The idea they don't have emotions is a fallacy. The whole point is that through the teachings, the applications of Surak, they understood how to control them. They're the most self-actualized people in the world for the most part, until they're not. And a lot of what's interesting about Vulcans is when you see a full Vulcan have to deal with an emotional situation and come to grips, like you did with Sarek and Spock's relationship. Your friends are people of good character. The whole great thing about the development of Spock's relationship with his father is by the time you get to Star Trek IV, Sarek is as proud as a father could be of his son. And that was such a great thing that they did in very few scenes, really. If you start from Journey to Babel and go all the way through even to Star Trek VI, it was pretty amazing to see that. But the struggle that Spock goes through, I'll tell you, what did they do? What did the writers? Another thing I object to with Star Trek Discovery is those writers felt the need to go back and retcon a character and turn them into somebody. Spock, the dichotomy of his heritage is what was unique to that character. Now they saddle him with, let's give him a learning disability because that's so of today. That's such a a thing of now. No, Spock was the product of two different species, not just two different points of view, but two different worlds. And then you're saddled with the fact that your dad's disappointed in you. Because even on Vulcan, a dad can be just like any other dad. He can be disappointed because you didn't follow in his footsteps. I want to go to Starfleet Academy. I want to see the universe. I don't want to go to the Vulcan Science Academy. I don't want to be stuck on this planet. I have a wanderlust, Dad. I want to go somewhere else. I want to be my own man. I'm of two worlds. You know, these were amazing things. Now Star Trek Discovery would have you believe that Spock was somehow suffered from some affliction because let's make it more relatable to people on this planet today. And let's say that, Michael Burnham, without Michael Burnham, Spock wouldn't be the man he is today. Fuck you. Who are you to say that? Who are you to go take a character that was not written by you, not conceived of by you, and you're going to go in and your writing staff is going to fundamentally change that character? Who are you to do that? Who are you to do that? And you know what? If Spock were alive, Kirk would never say, of all the souls I've encountered in my travels, his was the most human. He said that because Spock wasn't there, and everybody else understood what he meant, because they all felt the same way too. But nobody would say it in front of Spock. Or they might have, and maybe with Spock after his own experience with V'ger. Remember, he never entirely integrated his human half into himself until he encountered V'ger. This simple feeling. Anyway. However, to my way of thinking, the deepest value is not found in merely exhibitionistically displaying our pain. It is by going through the pain, experiencing the healing, and then being able to effectively convey that whole journey to others. That's really an exquisite form of art. It is an exquisite form of art, but is it something that we want to deal with on a Star Trek show, on not just one episode, a really interesting, compelling episode of science fiction where you could deal with these situations? But no, this series, this entire series, has been the ongoing Michael Burnham feels bad because this happened to them and this happened to her. And what are we going to do to make her, how many times is she going to cry in the context of a Star Trek show? Then you talk about, when it comes to artistic fruition, as Danny Boyle, artistic director of the opening ceremonies of the 2012 Olympics, said in the documentary Tubular Bells, the Mike Oldfield story piece in the ceremony, the most extraordinary pleasure in the album Tubular Bells is that he, Mike Oldfield, brings it all together. That feeling of something experimental being brought together and complete, because everyone can experiment and everyone can doodle and go off to strange places, and they're all fascinating, but to complete it and to give a sense of wholeness that he brings to you and the end of a journey is amazing, really, and it feels the sense of satisfaction and completion you get from that. It's the real reason it's successful. To have that kind of mainstream public appeal for something so weird without vocals over such a long space of time, to have that much public appeal means it's a masterpiece, I think. Having said all that, I don't think art disallows other, perhaps lesser but still valid, fragmentary stories which don't take us through the whole journey, or which even fail to provide much verisimilitude. It's just that when they're holistic, art can be fantastically satisfying and provide extraordinary meaning. Well, yes, that's true. Finally, what I see here is a generational cultural evolution. The mean world mentality tries to enforce a thesis that is a mean world now, always has been and always will be. But if we think about it, Gene Roddenberry and the originators of Star Trek actually don't seem to agree with that. Q and Gene Roddenberry's attitude was, humanity is currently a savage child race, and Gene Roddenberry thought we will grow past that point. Isn't the very soul of Star Trek that we are actually not stuck with being such a savage child race, but rather can write our own future? Maybe we're actually building a kind world? Why not? Isn't the moneyless, safety-netted federation that Gene Roddenberry firmly planted in TOS and especially in TNG a kind world vision for the future of humanity? Or humanics, whatever. In a way, I would say that even though it takes a bit of a roundabout path, the dialogue from A Taste of Armageddon supports my thesis that TOS actually had in mind advocating for a kind world syndrome. I don't disagree with you at all about that. I think that is absolutely true. But here's the thing. The universe is unkind. The universe is a place where black holes exist, where suns can go supernova and destroy the Romulan homeworld. The universe is indifferent. It's neither mean nor is it kind. It just is. And how is humanity going to navigate a universe that isn't either one of those things? And I think what humanity needs to be, no one wants to be mean. Being mean is counterproductive, ultimately. It will lead to a society that will eventually be destroyed. Being mean doesn't work. Being mean in groups doesn't work either. I think humanity works best when we are kind to one another. And that's what Star Trek was saying. Not that we have to change our mean world into a kind world, but that we've never had a kind world. We don't know what that is because people are too busy being mean to one another. But the thing is, a kind world works better. And if a kind world works better, let's not call it a kind world. Let's call it a functioning world, a world where humanity itself can be at its best. What did Anon 7 say? We're a killer species. It's instinctive. It's the same with you, your General Order 24. Kirk says, all right, it's instinctive, but the instinct can be fought. We're human beings with the blood of a million savage years on our hands, but we can stop it. We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill. Today. That's all it takes, knowing that we're not going to kill. Today. Contact Vendikar. So maybe we should take the Kirk, Crusher, Mary Sue, Gene Roddenberry's advice and think about getting serious about developing past our savage child race stage and get on to being the mature species capable of living in a kind world configuration such as TOS and the Next Generation at least portray the Federation, glimpsing a kind word future for humanity. That's from DJ Meta. Here's my problem. Our desire to make a kind world the way it is currently being, say, gone about, whether you want to call it safe spaces, whether you want to call it, we have to watch out for everybody's feelings. The universe is not going to do that. The universe is indifferent to your suffering or what you think is your problem or everyone else's problems. What we need to do is we have to forget about the fact we have to move forward, we have to toughen up, and we have to be more self-actualized as human beings. But we can't expect the rest of the world and everybody around us to do the same things that we expect of them all at one time. You can't, like, if somebody wants to change their, I don't know, life or whoever, like one day you decide, I'm no longer the person I've been for the last 30 years. I've decided I'm now this person. Well, you can't expect the rest of the world then to immediately accept that on that day, or that other people are not going to slip up and maybe call you the wrong name or this, that, and the other thing, because everybody's got their own lives to lead too. And you can't decide, like, I've now been, I've achieved some revelatory state, so I want everybody to be this way. And then when they're not that way, you can't just suddenly destroy them because they don't think the way you do. And I think we live in a really odd, scary time where the idea is, yes, do I want to live in a kind world? I do. But I also realize that the universe itself is not kind. And what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to lead my life amongst a lot of other people leading their lives in a way where we're trying to facilitate everyone else having the idea that, yes, maybe we can all live in a kind world. I believe in helping my fellow man or woman or however you want to identify yourself, whatever kind of being you are throughout these 28 known galaxies. My job as a human being on this planet, when I live in a society, is to do my part to help my fellow people that are on the same journey that I'm on to make their lives a little bit more enjoyable. The way I try and do it is through my work, whether it's this show, whether it's the movies I'm making, whether it's the animated series I'm working on, whether it's the podcasts I do, whatever it is, I'm trying to share the enthusiasm that I have for my little corner of our lives, and I hope that people will do that too. Every single day, I am out there and I get people. I had somebody tweet at me today that I'm a fucking asshole, this, that, and the other thing. And this person had never contacted me before. I don't know them. I tweeted them back. I said, listen, if that's the way you feel about me, why don't you come on my show and talk about it? Now, I want to say something. DJ Meta, don't know you, but I think this letter that you wrote me was fan-fucking-tastic. And while I might have disagreed with you, I admire the hell out of you for writing this letter, posting it publicly, and invite a response. This is exactly the kind of thing that we should be doing with one another. Having cogent, interesting, insightful, meaningful dialogue where we can talk to one another. You can take me to task. You can present your point of view. I can disagree with you, but we can do it in a respectful manner. And this, if nothing else, is what this channel is all about. And if we can have these kinds of discussions because of Star Trek, well then, I think the franchise, even Star Trek Discovery, is at least continuing on, boldly moving into a future where hopefully it'll still have things to say. Whether I happen to like this iteration of Star Trek or not, it's clearly saying things to you and saying things to other people that give me hope. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for writing me this letter or putting it out there. And thank you for allowing me, all of you allowing me, to respond. Now let's see what other people have to say at this point, because I don't know. Okay. I've got to go back down and see. Wow, lots of people. Oh, so Willow Yang. I love Willow. She always writes in first. God bless Willow Yang. Willow Yang says, do you feel that the corrupt admiral trope is used too often? Every time a new admiral gets introduced in an episode, I know that there's a good chance they're doing something shady and it ruins any surprises. You know, I do. And I think it's especially in Star Trek now, it's a, it is, again, part of the reason I hated Picard. Of course, you know the Admiral, whether it's sheer fucking hubris or whether it's Commander or Admiral O. Of course, what's with Star Trek making all of the Asian women, powerful Asian women, evil? What's up with that? Watchmen, the woman who wanted to steal the power of Dr. Manhattan, ultimately is Asian. That to me is sort of disturbing. But yes, I don't like that evil admiral trope, which again is just an easy, well, authority is bad. It's terrible. You know, whatever happened to the admiral that we met in Star Trek 3? I don't know. I like good admirals. I like Admiral Nechayev. Admiral Nechayev, Natalia Nogalich's character in Next Generation and in Deep Space Nine. There was a great Star Trek character that we needed to see more of. She was hard, but she was fair, and she was really good at her job. Scotty R37 became a member of the channel. Thank you. Magic K sends in a tip and says, a collection of James Bond films are free with ads on YouTube now and probably will stay free until No Time to Die hits theaters. Yeah, I think there's Bond movies everywhere. I've been on the Midnight's Edge podcast. Tom from Midnight's Edge had never seen a James Bond movie. So every Thursday we did Dr. No, and then we did From Russia with Love. We'll be watching Goldfinger this week, and it's been very fun to listen to Tom talk about Bond films when he's never seen them before. It's amazing. Amazing. Star Wars Rocks sent in a tip and said, hi, Rob, I sent you a letter on Friday, and I'm wondering if you read it yet. I have not, because I'll tell you something. Unless Mike sent me letters, hang on. I was not on Saturday, and I haven't had letters forwarded to me today. So I was just going to deal with this one open letter today. So I'll probably read it tomorrow. Brandon Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, have you had a chance to catch the Irish TV series Normal People, released earlier this year? I have not. It's an excellent boy-girl relationship story. Oh, yeah. It's based on an Irish novel by Sally Rooney, who co-wrote the show, the current hip young writer here in Ireland. I've heard about it. I have not seen it. I've heard it's quite good. It's one of those shows that people have told me is good. And, yeah, I haven't seen it. John Branch subscribed to the channel. Thank you, sir, John. Appreciate it. Mark C., our resident self-appointed toxic fan, even though he's really not. Mark C. is here. Mark says, Mikey Spock is not a Wesley crusher. Wesley, at least, had some faults and something resembling a character arc. I completely agree. Todd Tyler subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. Mark C. goes on to say, with The Mandalorian dropping on Friday, and in the interest of not spoiling it for people on this channel, should we establish a window for discussing a particular episode, not just The Mandalorian, but all shows? This is a big thing that's come up a lot with people, because not everybody can get to see a show. I mean, my feeling is that when it comes to a show like The Mandalorian or the latest episode of Discovery, I feel that I am obligated for what I do, whether it's being on the John Campea show, whether it's being on my own show, that I kind of have to talk about things when they drop if they're relevant. But I mean, maybe just because the way the world works now, 3 or 4 days go by and then it's no longer relevant anymore, and you're on to the next thing. But I think you're probably, look, in a perfect world, probably we should wait because not everybody can see it. But, look, on Friday mornings, I get up and we have Mando morning when Mando is on, where Elizabeth and I go make the coffee. You know, I'm her own barista. I make the coffee the way she likes it, which is not just pouring coffee. I have to, there's a little zhuzh involved. But I have to make sure that it's good. But then we like to enjoy coffee like at 8 in the morning because she has class. She's at Art Center. Or she has to go to class. She has to be in class, virtual class at 8. So we might have Mando morning at 7:15 and then watch The Mandalorian. Because I figure I've got to be able to talk to somebody. On the John Campea show, we talk about it. So, but you're probably right. Lieutenant Commander Salinga sends in a tip and says, "What is real Trek is not a myth or a lofty opinion. It is written down in the TOS and TNG Writers' Bibles. A Robservation about these Bibles and parts in them that describe the kind of storytelling and world-building writing that Trek demands." You know what? That's a really good idea. I used to have the TNG Writers' Bible. I could probably find one. I don't have it here. Lieutenant Commander Salinga goes on to say, example from the TOS Writers' Bible. Must the crew be perfect humans? No. But what kind of men would logically and believably man a vessel of this type? Obviously, they'd be better selected and trained than the wild enlisted shore leave group in Mr. Roberts. That's my point exactly. You know, in the writers who are writing for Star Trek currently, they would rather deal with issues like feelings and emotions than write a believable science fiction program. And I think, I mean, when you get hired on a show, if you're a great writer, look, Michael Chabon is a great novelist. I think he's great. Was he the best writer for Star Trek judging by Picard? I don't think so, because he writes different kind of science fiction. I think Star Trek is a very specific thing. It has to be written in a very specific way. And I think if you just bring in writers, I worked on Vampire Academy or Vampire Chronicles, where the hell I worked on, or I worked on a family show. A television writer isn't necessarily a great fit when it comes to, say, something like Star Trek. Lieutenant Commander Salinga goes on and says, the example, the Next Generation Bible says, believability is everything. It is the most essential element of any Star Trek story. Or you're in doubt, apply this test. Would I believe this if it was occurring on the bridge of the battleship Missouri? I remember reading that. That's a famous line out of the Writer's Bible. Yes, I completely agree with you. And modern Star Trek since 2009 has thrown that out the window. The Kelvin timeline, from the way they deal with rank to the way they deal with the Kobayashi Maru to the way they deal with even starships that are built within the gravity well of a planet that are shaped like Constitution-class starships. That's just wacky. I don't understand. Lieutenant Commander Salinga goes on and says, example, the TNG Bible says Star Trek is no melodrama. Melodrama is a writing style which does not require believable people. Believable people are at the heart of good Star Trek scripts. Bam, nailed it. Star Trek Discovery is half melodrama. It's half melodrama. This season has been half melodrama. Some of it has been good, like the speech that our 40-year-in-waiting Starfleet officer was telling us. Why they don't go get him, I don't know. But or at least throw him a bone. But you're absolutely right. And these are things that are I agree with 100%. No melodrama. It was right there. I think it's really you, Lieutenant Commander Salinga, are the first person I've seen bring this up. That there literally were Star Trek writers' Bibles that tell you how to write Star Trek. I'm going to start using that. I got to go find these because I'm going to arm myself. Instead of plot armor, I'm going to go get myself Trek armor. And there is no better Trek armor than the TOS and the TNG writers' Bibles. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you for that. Mr. Yerke is here. Hello, Jeff. Jeff says, hi, Rob. Thanks for carrying on the fight against Star Trek Discovery. You're watching it so that Mrs. Y and I don't have to. Yes, she says, hey, one day Elizabeth and I are going to have to come meet you both, and we're going to have to break bread together and have some wine. I bet you guys are a lot of fun to hang with. I wanted to put in a good word for the Hollywood pre-code film Babyface with Barbara Stanwyck. It blew me away. The Yerk Man. Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe we should watch that for whining about movies. I'll watch anything with Barbara Stanwyck. I don't know that film. I haven't seen it. Mark C says, in that case, I just bought an updated version of the Lego Razor Crest set. It came with 10 pieces of Lego and a match. Well, the episode was called The Tragedy. Yeah, all those people that just dropped, what is it, $400 for the Razor Crest? Ah, man, what a bummer. No, it's still a great ship. There's a lot of people that I know. I don't know why, but in the stream elements, it just popped up all the people that became members. Eric Gant, Phage Lives, The Amazing Yosh, Sean M, Brian Hepburn, Kaz Graphics, Jeffrey Mao, Captain Bazino, SB, Mike Bodden, Leslie Shell, Michael Ryan, Lord Toth, Cardinal Sin. You guys became members a while ago. I don't know why it's just popping up now, but thank you all. You all led. Don't say I didn't warn you. You're going to get that Moonraker, the drunk Moonraker. Have you heard about, Michael Preston says, have you heard about the new Broadway show, Michael Burnham Superstar? They're trying to cast Jesus Burr, but even he doesn't feel he's messianic enough. Can you imagine? That's actually funny. That makes me want to go write the whole book for Michael Burnham Superstar. Simon is here. Simon says, with verisimilitude, can you think of a first officer who did not complete Starfleet Academy and, if I may say without sounding prejudiced, does not look like they could hold their own in a fight? I'm talking about Tilly's weight. Now, Simon, I want to say something about Tilly, about Ensign Tilly. Not a fan of that character. But the actress did have a baby. And I think that we have to allow, we talk about female power. Women's bodies change when they carry children. Does that mean that they shouldn't be able to come back and act on a show because they don't look, say, as perfect as maybe we might want them to? It has been disturbing to me to read people complaining about her weight. And I think that I would just assume, I mean, obviously, that you got to cut her some slack. And I know that within the verisimilitude of the show, it might be, a little hard to take, but it has disturbed me that Mary Wiseman's been taking the slings and arrows of fandom, when really she's going through the natural progression of what is supposed to happen in the life cycle of a human being. So I don't like that. I mean, I don't. But the idea that they made Tilly first officer, I mean, give me a break. This is my problem with the show, and I don't like. Again, it's like Kirk being given command of the Enterprise at the end of Star Trek 09. I mean, what, he didn't take command of the Enterprise in the original series till he was 34. He'd been on various starships. He'd worked his way up the ranks for over a decade and a half, Starfleet Academy whenever he went in. But, you almost had 20 years of Starfleet operations and learning in the Academy and working your way up. So these kinds of things make no sense, but they have to because she's a series regular. But if I was making that show, wouldn't Saru, to me, if you want to introduce a new character on that show, and they should have introduced a new character that Saru brought in from the 22nd or 32nd century, that somebody maybe he met at Starfleet and they had a really interesting relationship. But no, I think it's problematic. Bruce Thompson subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Bruce. Anan Gonzalez sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, you keep bringing up a Jewish Vulcan connection. I'm not seeing it. Are there Jewish customs that are Vulcan-like? Well, aside from the fact that this is the letter Shin, and Leonard Nimoy brought this in from what he saw happening in the synagogue, I think that can't Nimoy and Leonard's casting be coincidental? Aren't there a lot of Jewish actors in Hollywood? Shatner and Koenig are Jewish too. Is that suggestive? No, but I do think that when you are casting, look, once you cast Leonard Nimoy in the role, the reason you cast Mark Leonard in the role is because he looks similar to Leonard Nimoy. And the reason you go get somebody like Celia Lofsky to play T'Pau is they're similar there. So, look, may I be reading something into it? Perhaps. But I can tell you myself, look, I'm the most goy-looking Jew ever. But I had a big Jewish education. I went to Sunday school. I learned Hebrew. I was bar mitzvahed, all of that. And I don't speak much Hebrew at all anymore. I should have stuck with it. But I do think that the whole idea of the Vulcan way of life and being scholarly and learning and all of that, it's definitely I think the characterization of the Vulcans as portrayed in the original series was definitely inspired by certain elements of, I mean, it could be you could say, sure, anybody that believes in being a scholarship and all that, but I know personally that I recognized in the Vulcan society as depicted in the original series that there was a lot of Judaism or Jewish. I mean, how could you not? You're writing for Leonard Nimoy, and Leonard Nimoy's religious background was very important to him. So the people that were writing for him were probably not unaware of that. So I do think that the way Spock was written, and again, maybe I could find an article or maybe find what Dorothy Fontana would have thought about something like that. But and I know people can tell me that, oh, Gene Roddenberry was anti-Semitic or whatever, but I do think the way Spock was written, the way the Vulcans were written in the original series, was definitely inspired by Judaism. And nowadays, there's a lot of people that, of course, are anti-Israel, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism is on the rise these days. And I know that the same impulses that are guiding the hands of the writing staff of Star Trek Discovery now, I don't necessarily think are always conducive. I mean, all you have to do is look at the way the Vulcans were written. Where's the Sarek, or where is the Surak, or where is the T'Pau? I will say this. I really did like the president of Vulcan. I thought she was great. And I thought, as a matter of fact, she might be my favorite modern Vulcan in any Star Trek. And I would like to have seen much more of her. I'm sorry we didn't. I love the actress, and I love that character, and I love the relationship that she had with Saru. I would like to have seen an episode about the two of them. So, anyway, Simon says, please accept my apology for my ignorance regarding the actress playing Tilly. Oh, man, that's no problem. I mean, I know. That's a lot of people don't know that. And that's one thing. When you start attacking actors, the weight of actors, it's a slippery slope, you know. And I think that look, I actually think Mary Wiseman's probably a pretty great actress, but again, she's not being given. She's playing the material that she's been given the way she's supposed to play it, and it's such a schizophrenic character. I would really like to see her character being written as not somebody who seems to be on the spectrum or something, but as a really capable Starfleet officer. I think that she could really deliver the goods. And I hope the way they're going to write her from now on reflects that, because I mean, I want to punch her in the face most of the time, because I'm like, why are you acting this way in the position that you're in on a starship 1,000 years in the future? Why can't you act like a Starfleet officer? And I think I saw glimmers of that. And I saw glimmers of that. You see glimmers of hope. As a matter of fact, I have something very interesting that I cannot share. I know I'm vague vlogging, but I just was sent something that's very interesting that, let's say, inspires hope in me about some aspects of the future of the Star Trek franchise. But I'm not going to get my hopes up that high. SNW, baby. So Simon, no problem. Richard goes on, Richard tips, and he says, it always seemed to me that the absolute candor idea was come up with in a writer's room for people who really don't like Vulcans very much. Also, warrior women who tell the truth, no matter how inadvisable. How does that work in a secretive and planned society? It doesn't. That's the thing. It's an idea that you come up with in a writer's room that in an indifferent universe doesn't exactly work. How can you have absolute candor in a situation like you just described? It doesn't make it. It doesn't work. I agree. And again, why would there be a sect of Romulans that have look, the idea of absolute candor is fine, but how do you negotiate from that position? I don't know. I mean, absolute candor seems more like, again, some kind of a Tony Robbins self-help thing than anything else. And indeed, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's almost like everybody's writing the writing staff of it's like the understanding that our ecosystem, the ocean, is, Elizabeth was telling me this the other day. She's watching a documentary a series that she wants me to watch. And part of the documentary series was that we take so many, our society, America especially, takes so many prescription drugs. And those drugs pass through our systems when we eliminate them, and they work their way out to the sea, these chemicals. And the fish are eating our antidepressants or our over-the-counter drugs or our prescription drugs, and they find their way into the food supply, and it disrupts the behavior of fish. And fish groups, they get decimated because they are affected by these chemicals that we're putting into our bodies and sending out into the world. So we think as human beings, because we're only thinking from our perspective, that, oh, I've come up with a way to help. I'm going to help everybody, but this is my idea. And yeah, you guys, you should take Zoloft or Percocet or whatever, Adderall, whatever it is, whatever drug it is. I don't own any prescription drugs. I've never had a prescription for a drug since I took tetracycline for acne when I was in high school, and that was only once. And I never even took tetracycline because I had chlamydia. So I've never had prescription drugs, but the idea of how many prescription drugs, I mean, where do you think that all these chemicals, they don't just stay in your body. So we don't even think that way. You know, when Elizabeth was telling me this, I'm thinking, wow, that's something I never considered. The fish are being affected by our prescription drug use. Huh. That's what a closed system will do. But everybody comes up with these ideas like, ooh, absolute candor sounds really, we'll have it. Let's have absolute candor, until you try to put it into practice. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially in a tactical situation. And Gonzalez says, I get you now. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Richard comes back and says, what did that person send you? Is Deep Space Nine coming back? Wow, Deep Space Nine is coming back. Star Trek is saved. No, Deep Space Nine is not coming back. Yeah, I wish it were. But it did in the books. Like, there's a lot of great Star Trek novels about the post-Dominion War, Deep Space Nine. I keep saying it. Some of my favorite Star Trek of the modern age has been in the novels. The post-Dominion War novels that have a great continuity, stuff that Dayton Ward's written, stuff that David Mack has written, stuff that Christopher Bennett has written. There's great stuff. Keith DeCandido's written. There's a lot of great people out there writing great Star Trek stories, which I don't understand. Why don't they adapt them? I don't know. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, however you identify from across these 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring this episode of Robservations, a show about something, episode number 570, to an end. First of all, before I end, why don't we check on the Seahawks game, shall we? Am I looking at... I can't believe it. The Seahawks lost to the Giants. See? It's because I wasn't watching. I was ranting about Star Trek Discovery, and the Seahawks lost. The Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest lost the game. Now I can blame myself. It's my fault. It's my fault. Damn it. Damn it. Anyway, we're still on the top of our division, so... Or maybe we're not. Ugh, can't believe we lost the Giants. God... Or as my mom would say, Bob! Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, across 28 known galaxies, the Seahawks lost. But we had fun today, right? I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel. I will get back to reading letters tomorrow. And I have a lot of them to catch up on. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel through tips and letters and joining becoming a member and all that. I very much appreciate that. Like and subscribe. You know, for 45 days, I had no new subscribers to this channel. I just had subscribers taken away. I don't know if it's because of a purge. It was so strange. I felt so dejected. I know it was a YouTube thing, but I want to thank you all new subscribers for subscribing again or resubscribing. I don't know. These episodes are now all going to be available as a podcast. I think we're all already up on Apple Podcasts. The last two are. You can get them on Spotify and hopefully wherever else you get podcasts. I'm waiting to find out if they will be on Amazon soon. I applied, but it's something people had wanted, so I'm making that happen. So that's something else, that extra work I do. Thank you for that. You support that as well. So subscribe, and if you do listen to the podcast, please like them and I've never had a podcast and paid much attention to it in terms of being a podcast, downloadable and all that. So that would be great. And I want to thank the moderating staff. I want to thank The Richard. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Joshua Levesque, who is here. I don't know who else is here. Sorry, I'm coughing. Mr. Derringer is here. Hello, Mr. Derringer. How are you? Thank you all for doing what you do. And with that, this episode of Robservations, show about something, is going to end. Indeed, there is another episode of Let's Get Physical Media, hopefully that will be dropping today, where Dieter and I, it's different. The show with that we did yesterday with Bill Hunt is a different show. That was a special edition show. I also put up on the channel the full long interview with comic legend Bill Sienkiewicz that has been languishing away since the 400th episode. I finally put the whole interview up today for the people that have been asking. And also 4 films dropped for the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival today. They're on the channel. Watch those. Please comment. Please interact. The filmmakers have done such a great job. There's a lot of stuff coming up in the next couple days, which is very exciting, all the way through the December 15th and December 16th. We're going to be showing, I think, new movies are dropping every day. So thank you for that. Now, for those of you who have asked, the short story competition opened on December 2nd. I have not put in, the rules have not gone up yet. But just so you guys know, in a nutshell, 5,000 to 10,000 words. The book that you would potentially be in is for those of you who don't know, if you haven't heard this, we are also now running a contest, a short story competition, and we are going to be publishing an anthology called The Imagination Connoisseurs. Now, what is an imagination connoisseur? I came up with that term sort of vague. To me, it was anybody who likes science fiction, fantasy, horror, video games, comic books, cosplay, reading, whatever. You're all imagination connoisseurs. But I wanted to know, I thought it would be interesting, so we're going to publish an anthology book called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and all entries should be between 5 and 10,000 words, and you should somehow deal with what that is. You can define through your story, define what is an imagination connoisseur. What is an imagination connoisseur like? You might just write a horror story that imagination connoisseurs would dig. I leave that entirely up to you. But that short story competition is going to run until February 14th, until Valentine's Day, and I'm going to pick one of those stories and turn it into a short film beginning in March. Hopefully the film will go into pre-production March 1st, and we will have it done for my birthday on May 15th. I'm going to direct it. I'm going to write it with the writer of the original short story to adapt that story, and we'll see how that goes. And then we're going to publish a really nice hardcover slipcased edition of the book. Now, everybody's stories, there will be revenue sharing in terms of any proceeds that are going to be made. The short stories, all we're asking for in terms of licensing, by entering the competition, you grant us the license to reprint your story in our book. All the other rights are retained by you. All we're asking for is that you're granting us the right to publish your story as a one-time thing in this anthology. And then we're going to sell the book, but everybody who writes for it will have revenue sharing in that. I mean, I'm sure we're not going to make a lot of money, but it's going to be cool to have. And also, we are running a contest as part of this to design the cover. And as I said, I was thinking a standard hardcover is what we're going for. I have not yet found the measurements, but this is kind of what I was thinking. Here's a Kim Stanley Robinson, just a hardcover like this. So you'd have to design the dust flaps. And the text, we got to figure out what we're going to do. But basically the idea, again, the imagination connoisseurs. So you'd be designing, you could do the whole font, you could do everything. Or you could just do the artwork and we'll have someone else design the font. I leave it up to you. And obviously the winner is going to be on the cover of the book, and you will also be able to be a judge for the short story contest. So there we go. Anoctium, subscribe to the channel. So I'm going to end the show, everyone. Thanks very much for being here. I very much appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow on the John Campy Show. I will be back here and look for whining about movies. I believe we're doing it tonight. Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs tonight. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day. I mean, at least have a better day than the Seahawks had today.